Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Hello my dear friends and students, to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. We are welcoming you for the video lecture series of the program called BBA Regular, in that subject called Management Accounting, in that block number 3, unit number 1, Working Capital Management 1, part B. In a previous session, we studied that the introduction portion, definition, and the nature and concept of working capital. In this session, we studied what are their needs for working capital, and second is the determinants of working capital management. Now let us start our section with discussing the needs of working capital. The working capital plays an important role in a business. Working capital remains blocked while playing, or we can say while buying the raw materials and making people to work, and in preparing of the finished product, along with the cost involved in a certain marketing activity. The needs of working capital are different from a different organization, or we can say the different businesses. In a first way, we can say that ample of working capital is required to maintain the regular supply of raw materials that makes smoothen the production process. Then it ensure of regular and timely payment of wages and salaries, which finally help in improving the moral and efficiency of employees. Then such capital is needed for effective use of fixed assets. Then it supports goodwill and helps in building good relationship, or we can say the good reputation, while making the payment to creditors on a time. And working capital helps in avoiding the possibility of undercapitalization. The working capital is required in order to get the ample of raw material in case of economic slowdown, or we can say the crisis also. This capital, that is working capital, is required or to pay the good rate of dividend and interest within the particular time, that makes boosting of investors' confidence in the firm. Working capital is essential in a smooth running of business. Without adequate working capital, there are hardly any business that can run successfully in a nature, and it has the certain advantages are there. The first advantage, that the strengthen of solvency. The working capital help in operations of business smoothly without any financial crisis, which leads to payments related to the short-term liabilities. Buying raw material and salary wages with a certain overheads can be made without any delay. The adequate working capital helps in maintaining solvency of a business by providing uninterrupted flow of the production. The second advantage are that is a uplift of goodwill. The sufficient working capital enables a business concern to make promote payments and hence help in creating and maintaining the goodwill. Goodwill is enhanced because all current liabilities and operating expenses are paid on time. Then easy obtaining loan. A firm having adequate working capital, high solvency and the good credit ratios, or we can say the good credit rating, can arrange the loan from banks and financial institutions in a easy and favorable terms. The next advantage, that is a regular supply of raw materials. The quick payment of credit purchase of raw materials ensures the regular supply of raw materials from suppliers, and the suppliers are satisfied by the payment on a time. It ensures regular supply of raw materials and continuous productions. The next advantage, that is a smooth business operation. The working capital is really a lifeblood of any business organization which maintains the firm in a well condition. Any day-to-day financial requirements can be met without any shortage of fund. All expenses and current liabilities are paid on a time. The next point, that is the ability to face crisis. Adequate working capital enables a firm to face business crisis in emergencies such depressions also. So ultimately we can say the ability to face the crisis is the great chance while we maintaining our working capital in an efficient manner. On that, after defining the needs of a working capital and the different advantages with respect to the needs, let us examine the determinants of working capital. Generally, it is seen that the company normally, as per the policy, want to hold with him certain capital balances for working in order to overcome the certain solvency risks. This is a logical approach that identifying that the working capital is a means to end and not an end in itself. We see that the quantitative working capital can hardly be set for a firm, as the corporate management are considering the ample of factors in making the decision regarding balances. An appraisal of this would provide the guidance to management in estimating prospective needs, and these are called as the determinants of working capital. Some of the most determinants of working capitals are: the first is nature of business. We see that the working capital of a company depends on the type of business. Companies who are into the public services like railways, electricity, etc., would need only small amount of working capital, while manufacturing and trading firm needs the larger working capital for operation. Next is length of a period of manufacturers. Amount of working capital required is highly influenced by the length of manufacturing cycle. If the manufacturing process is long, in such cases the large amount of working capital is required. So normally companies shorten the period of cycle to minimize the needs of working capital. They are not going for the long run, always for a short term. Next is production process flow. If the company estimates its production need, what is the manufacturers will likely vary the somewhat from the actual demand, resulting in excess of amount of inventory on hand. Conversely, a just-in-time system produces the goods only to order, so the investment in inventory is ultimately reduced. While any component of manufacturing process is reduced, at that point of time you need a very less working capital. So the production process flow is also important in a nature. The next is growth rate. In case of a business is expanding at a high rate, it increases the investment in receivables and inventory period. Unless the profit are too high, it is unlikely that entity can generate the sufficient cash to pay such receivables and inventories, which leads to steady increase in a working capital. On the other hand, if the business is shrinking, its working capital gets decline with spines of a excess of a cash. So it is also important for the growth rate. If your working capital is a smooth, if your working capital is in appropriate way, the defining or definitions of that working capital is in good way, at that point of time the growth rates are very important in a nature. Then the turnover of working capital. If the company estimates its production needs, that is what is to manufacturers will likely vary somewhat from actual demand and resulting in an excess amount of inventories on hand. And conversely, a just-in-time system produces the goods only to order, so the investment in inventory is reduced. And I told that where the inventory is reduced or any one component with respect to your working capital is reduced, then your working capital makes an efficient manner. Then the terms of credit. If a business offers easy credit terms to the customers, the company is investing in account receivable that may be outstanding for a long time, and this investments may be reduced by the lightening the credit policy, but doing so may drive away some customers also. So the terms of credit is also important in a nature, because it is ultimately defining what the credit systems are evolved in your working capital management. Next point is that is seasonal variations. The seasonal changes, or we can say the season change in economy, also affect the quantum of working capital. The huge amount of working capital is required during the period of inflation and depressions. and the requirement declining during the other periods of an economic cycle also. So you have to maintain your funds in a good way, that the any economic crisis or any seasonal variances are occurred, at that point of time you are in a good situation or win-win situation, that you easily mitigate your expenses over it. Then requirement of cash. Needs for the working capital depends upon the amount of cash required by the company for various purposes. If the greater the requirement of cash, the higher will be the working capital needs to the company, and vice versa. So the requirement of cash is also important in nature. With defining this particular point, you have to remember the working capital cycle, the working capital management cycle. Cash to inventory, inventory to receivables, receivables to maintaining the investments. Yes or no? So these are the different determinants of working capital over there. This one is also important aspect for defining what we learn in a working capital. This is the first part of your block 3 unit number 1, working capital management 1. Let us sum up the today's session. In this unit, we have learnt that the working capital management is a methodology where the company manages relationship among the current assets, or we can say the assets and liability, for a short duration. It is seen that the good working capital management takes care of main part of corporate strategy, which involves the policy of a various company in terms of profitability, solvency, liquidity, and the structure of the firm. The working capital helps in operation of a business smoothly without any financial crisis, which leads to the payment related to the short-term liabilities over there. So what we studied in this particular session, or we can say in particular this unit number 1, working capital management part 1, that is the introductive part of working capital. Then we define and take the definitions with respect to working capital. After defining working capital management, we examine the cycle of working capital management, that is cash to inventory, inventories to receivables to maintainable, investments over there. Then again go to the cash, inventory, receivable, maintaining the investment, etc. With respect to that, we define the needs and the concept of working capital management. Then we define what, my dear friends? That is a concept of working capital. Concept of working capital management. With respect to that, gross working capital and net working capital. Gross working capital is equal to your total current assets, and net working capital is equal to nothing but your difference between what? Current assets and current liabilities. After that, we defining the needs of working capital. In that, with respect to the needs, there are different advantages are over there that we define in today's session. Then we define the determinants of working capital management. So with respect to this study, we ultimately know about the what is working capital management, what are the concepts of working capital management, and the needs and the determinants of working capital management, etc. With this session, to watching this particular session, you have to evaluate yourself with the 3 aspects. First aspect is a long-term question, or we can say the long question, that you have to write down the long questions. Second is write down the short question, and third aspect is solving the multiple choice questions. And after that, if you want to go or you want to refer something more with respect to this working capital management, then you may refer the different books also. So let us examine the first aspects of our session, that is a long questions. The first question is to describe the needs of working capital management. Second, describe the determinants of working capital management. In a short question, define the terms of credit and define what is working capital. Now, my dear friends, you have to evaluate that what is working capital that we studied in a previous session. Why you are going for this question in a second session? That's why, because we studied the needs of working capital. In that point, we learned what is working capital as well. And with respect to the different advantages, we also defining that what is working capital as well. So we have to write down the short question to defining the working capital. In a next concept, that is a multiple choice question. The first question is to inadequate working capital creates to the smooth business operation, regular supply of raw material, face crisis and uplift the goodwill. So inadequate working capital is create nothing but you are faced to the crisis also. Then second question is which type of unit would need small amount of working capital? Manufacturing unit, public service unit like railway, both or none of the above. So answer will be the public service like a railway, as we learn in a session, that is a railway and electricity, etc. So here the railway is a correct answer. After that, if you want to research or study more, then you may refer this different types of reference books also. So this is what, my dear friends, we learn in today's session. Hope you enjoy this study of today's session with respect to the working capital management part 1, unit 1 of block 3 of the subject called management accounting. We will meet in a next session with respect to the new topic in this subject. Thank you very much, my dear friends.